The embers have long gone cold, but the ashes still whisper. In the quiet streets of a small Texas town, where Christmas lights once flickered with hope, a fire tore through a home, and with it, a family. December 23, 1991. A night meant for celebration became an inferno of tragedy. 3 little girls, lost to the flames. A father, accused of lighting the spark. But what if the truth burned brighter than the fire itself? What if justice, blind and unyielding, cast its verdict not on facts, but on shadows? This is Shadow of Crime, where we step into the darkness to uncover the stories that haunt, the cases that linger, and the truths buried beneath the rubble. Tonight, we unravel the chilling tale of Cameron Todd Willingham, a man condemned by a town, a system, and a lie that refused to die. Light a candle. Lock the door. The fire is out, but the story is just beginning. Welcome to the Shadow of Crime. Part 1. The night that was meant to be a celebration. December 23, 1991. Corsicana, Texas, a small town where time seems to stand still. Narrow streets, bathed in the dim glow of streetlights, breathe with the quiet anticipation of the holidays. The air carries the scent of pine branches and smoke curling from chimneys, while shop windows shimmer with drawings of artificial snow traced by children's hands. This is a place where neighbors wave over fences, and tragedies feel like distant tales from big city newspaper headlines. At the heart of this idyllic scene is Cameron Todd Willingham, 23 years old, a man with rugged features and a reputation trailing a faint shadow of petty sins. He lives in an old house on Avalon Street, where wooden walls creak under the breath of winter wind. With him are his wife, Stacy, worn down by the daily struggle to survive, and their 3 daughters, 2-year-old Amber, with her golden curls, and 1-year-old twins, Cameron and Carmen, whose laughter and cries fill the home with warmth. The family lives modestly. Stacy works at a bakery, where the smell of fresh bread mingles with her dreams of a better life, while Cameron scrapes by with odd jobs, hiding his failures behind a broad smile. That morning, Stacy heads to the store, leaving the children with her husband. The sun barely pierces through low-hanging clouds, and the house on Avalon slumbers in pre-holiday stillness. Cameron, sprawled on an old couch, closes his eyes. Silence. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant bark of a dog. But in an instant, everything changes. A crackle, the smell of smoke, and a scream that tears the heart apart. At 10:45 a.m., neighbors, startled by a loud crash and seeing tongues of flame, call the fire department. The fire, like a living beast, devours the house with terrifying speed. Wooden beams snap like bones, and thick, black smoke cloaks the sky. Cameron, barefoot and in jeans, stumbles onto the porch. His eyes, wide with panic, search for a way back inside, but the flames have already sealed every entrance. Neighbors watch as he screams, pounding against the wall of fire, but firefighters drag him away by force. 3 children, Amber, Cameron, and Carmen, remain trapped inside. Their small bodies, embraced by the flames, have no chance. When the fire finally subsides, rescuers find only ash and charred remains. Their deaths were agonizing, unrelenting. On the street, Cameron stands, clutching a cigarette. His face is a frozen mask. No tears, no screams, only the trembling of fingers holding the lighter's flame. The firefighters exchange glances. "Why isn't he crying?" one whispers. This moment, etched in the witnesses' memories, becomes the first nail in Willingham's coffin. Can a man whose world is burned to the ground stand so calmly? Can a father, having lost 3 daughters, simply smoke while staring at the ashes? In Corsicana, 1991, the answer was clear: no. Part 2. An investigation born from ashes. The fire died out, but it left behind not only the ruins of a house, but a shadow of suspicion. Smoke still hung in the air as fire inspectors began sifting through the debris. Their boots crunched on the charred floor, and flashlights caught strange patterns in the darkness, so-called puddles, localized burn marks. To the inspectors, these were like a criminal's signature, flammable liquid. The window panes, cracked in a web of fractures, seemed to whisper of extreme heat. The flames that had engulfed the house so quickly felt unnatural. This was no accident, declared Manuel Vasquez, the lead inspector, his voice carrying the weight of a man who had seen countless fires. His conclusion was unequivocal: arson. 3 points of origin. Someone had poured a flammable liquid and deliberately set the house ablaze. 2 weeks later, on January 8, 1992, Cameron Willingham was arrested. Handcuffs snapped around his wrists before he could recover from his grief. The charge, 3 counts of intentional murder under aggravating circumstances. There was no motive, no direct evidence, either. But in Corsicana, where rumors spread faster than fire, none of that was necessary. Willingham, standing before investigators, repeated, "I didn't do it. I love my girls." But his words drowned in a sea of prejudice. His reputation, petty thefts, drinking, arguments with his wife, became a canvas on which a monster's portrait was painted. Part 3. Justice that burned faster than the house. Crimes committed by the state often begin with someone simply being disliked. In the Corsicana courtroom, the air was heavy with tension. Prosecutor John Jackson, a man with cold eyes and a voice that cut like steel, stood before the jury. To him, Willingham's case was straightforward. A young man with a checkered past, unemployed, with a Slayer poster on his wall and a rebel's reputation. Wasn't he the perfect culprit? Manuel Vasquez's fire investigation became the cornerstone of the accusation. His words, puddles, cracks, rapid spread, sounded like incantations. No chemical analysis, no tests for gasoline or other accelerants. Only his experience, which in 1991 was deemed indisputable. But the real blow came from Willingham's behavior. The prosecution painted him as a cold-blooded sociopath. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He smoked a cigarette while his house burned. Witnesses, neighbors, firefighters added details. He stood like a statue. His eyes were empty. No one asked whether shock could paralyze a person, whether grief could manifest differently than tears. Jackson concocted a motive from thin air. Willingham was supposedly tired of family life. His children were a burden, and the fire was his way to break free. Evidence? A neighbor's tale about Cameron once throwing a chair against a wall, and that skull poster in his room. Part 4. The jailhouse informant and a fragile foundation. Another key player emerged in the courtroom, Johnny Webb, an inmate from a neighboring cell. His scarred face and nervous gaze didn't inspire trust, but his words were gold to the prosecution. Webb claimed Willingham confessed to him about the arson. He said he wanted to get rid of the kids, Webb quoted, staring at the floor. The jury listened, holding their breath. But behind the scenes, the truth was hidden. Webb was a chronic drug addict with psychiatric issues. Prosecutor Jackson had promised him a reduced sentence and cash after release. Webb's confession, riddled with contradictions, went unchecked. His words became another nail in Willingham's coffin. The trial was brief. The jury, exhausted by gruesome details and convinced of obvious guilt, delivered their verdict: guilty. The sentence: death. As Willingham was led from the courtroom, his eyes burned with rage. "You're killing an innocent man," he spat. But the room was deaf to his words. Part 5. Death Row and Letters to Nowhere. Huntsville Prison, a place where time drags like viscous, tarry smoke. Cameron's cell is cramped, with gray walls that reek of rust and despair. His only connection to the world was through letters. In them, he wrote to Stacy, family, and lawyers, "I didn't kill my girls. I see them in my dreams every night. I'm not a monster." But outside, his voice went unheard. Corsicana had already passed its judgment. Willingham was a monster. Newspapers printed heart-wrenching headlines. Father burned his children. Stacy, crushed by grief and community pressure, began to waver. Her confused, contradictory testimony at trial only strengthened the prosecution's case. Meanwhile, the system churned forward like a steamroller. Prosecutor Jackson celebrated his victory. To him, Willingham was just a case number, another checkmark in his career. But in the shadows of this justice, cracks were beginning to form, soon to widen. Part 6. Science that arrived too late. While Cameron Willingham languished on death row, where each day stretched into eternity, the world of science beyond Huntsville Prison marched relentlessly forward. In 1992, as the shadow of accusations loomed over Willingham, the National Fire Protection Association, NFPA, published a game-changing document, NFPA 921. This thick manual, filled with technical jargon, was the first of its kind to demand science, not intuition, in fire investigations. It explicitly stated, no puddle on the floor, no crack in a window, no rapid spread of flames could be considered evidence of arson without chemical analysis. It was a revolutionary step meant to dismantle myths that underpinned hundreds of convictions, including Willingham's. But in Corsicana, 1991, an FBA 921 was unknown. Manuel Vesquez, the lead fire inspector whose findings formed the backbone of the accusation, didn't flip through scientific manuals. His experience, decades of work backed by confidence, not facts, was his sole tool. In his world, cracked glass whispered of gasoline, and charred floors screamed of crime. Vesquez stood before the Willingham's burned house, flashlight in hand, seeing not a puzzle but an answer: arson. His words, delivered with prophetic weight, became gospel for the investigation, despite no lab tests confirming the presence of flammable liquids. In the early 2000s, a ray of light pierced this darkness. Gerald Hurst, an engineer and renowned fire safety expert, took up Willingham's case. His office, cluttered with photos of burned buildings and scientific journals, became a battleground for truth. Hurst meticulously reviewed the case files, Vesquez's yellowed reports, blurry photos from the scene, court transcripts steeped in hasty conclusions. He conducted experiments, recreating the fire's conditions, and his findings were devastating. So-called puddles on the floor? A natural phenomenon when fire unevenly heats a surface, leaving marks resembling spilled liquid. Cracked glass? Caused by sudden temperature shifts, not accelerants. Rapid flame spread? An old wooden house with dry beams and poor ventilation could ignite in seconds from a stray spark, no gasoline needed. Hurst proposed an alternative theory. The fire could have started from a faulty outlet or an old appliance hidden in the walls of the Avalon house. His report, sent to the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles in 2004, was a cry in the wilderness. Every paragraph, backed by facts and calculations, dismantled the prosecution's foundation. But in Texas, where the death penalty was a political emblem, no one rushed to listen. Governor Rick Perry, whose career was built on toughness, brushed off the report like an annoying fly. Willingham's time was running out, and the truth Hurst carried remained locked behind bureaucratic doors. This moment was a tragic turning point. Science that could have saved a life arrived too late. Part 7. The Final Breath. February 17, 2004. Huntsville Prison, Texas. The execution chamber is sterile, its green walls gleaming coldly and smelling of disinfectant. At the room's center is a table, resembling a hospital bed but fitted with straps that tightly bind the body. Fluorescent lights flood the space with harsh, unnatural brightness, illuminating the faces of guards, witnesses, and Cameron Todd Willingham, who lies before them, strapped down like a victim of an ancient ritual. His hands, scarred from a hard life, tremble as the straps tighten around his wrists. His eyes, once filled with anger and despair, now gaze at the ceiling, as if seeking answers that never came. The room is deathly silent, broken only by the creak of the guards' boots and the faint hum of medical equipment. Witnesses behind the glass stand frozen, some with contempt, others with doubt, but all with a sense of inevitability. Cameron turns his head as far as the restraints allow and begins to speak. His voice, hoarse from years in confinement, quavers, but it carries no fear, only rage and painful certainty. "I didn't kill my girls," he says, enunciating each word clearly. "I loved Amber, Cameron, and Carmen more than life itself. You're killing an innocent man. One day the truth will come out, and you'll all know." His words hang in the air, like smoke unable to find an escape. At 6:20 p.m., a nurse inserts a needle into his vein. The chemicals, phenobarbital, pancuronium bromide, and potassium chloride, slowly flood his body, like a cold river extinguishing the last sparks of life. Cameron holds his breath, his chest rising one final time before going still. His eyes, still open, slowly lose their light. Minutes later, the monitor emits a long, monotonous beep. Cameron Todd Willingham is dead. Behind the glass, the witnesses remain silent. Some look away, others nod, as if affirming justice. Prosecutor John Jackson, absent from the execution but triumphant in the verdict, later tells reporters, "Justice has been served." But in this sterile room, where a man's life ended on schedule, justice smelled not of victory but of ash. Willingham's death did not end his story. It became the spark that ignited a fight for truth that continues to this day. His final words, spoken with such force, lingered in the minds of those who heard them, becoming a call that could not be silenced. Part 8. The collapse of hearings and the rebirth of truth. After the execution on February 17, 2004, Cameron Willingham's case could have vanished into the archives, buried under the weight of bureaucracy and indifference. But Gerald Hurst's report, like a smoldering ember, fell into the hands of those seeking justice. His findings, initially ignored by Texas's judicial system, resonated with David Grann, a journalist for The New Yorker. His 2009 article, Trial by Fire, was not just an investigation, it was a scream in the dark, tearing through the veil of silence. Grann meticulously detailed how pseudoscience, prejudice, and a rushed trial destroyed a man's life and, with it, faith in justice. The article sparked action from the Texas Forensic Science Commission, which began reviewing the case, the first such investigation of a possible wrongful conviction in the state's history. Independent experts, including Craig Bayer, a fire safety specialist, were brought in. Bayer's conclusions were crushing. No evidence points to arson. He noted that the 1991 investigation violated basic scientific principles, relying on outdated myths instead of facts. He emphasized that even a simple chemical analysis could have debunked the accusations, but it was never conducted. Yet Texas was slow to admit fault. The system, long proud of its harshness, resisted. Governor Rick Perry, feeling political pressure, abruptly replaced 3 commission members in 2009 when their findings threatened his reputation. The move sparked outrage, with journalists calling it an attempt to smother the truth. But instead of fading, Willingham's case gained momentum, becoming a symbol of systemic injustice. Part 9. A confession that shifted the perspective. By 2014, the pressure on the justice system became unbearable. Johnny Webb, the jailhouse informant whose voice once sealed Willingham's fate, took a step no one expected. In a letter to attorneys, he confessed, "I lied. Jackson bought my testimony." His words were like a bolt of lightning, illuminating the case's dark corners. Webb revealed how the prosecutor had promised him a reduced sentence and financial aid, a tempting offer for a man grappling with drug addiction and mental illness. Webb admitted his testimony was a fabrication, woven from desperation and fear. He described how Jackson coached him on what to say, shaping his words into the prosecution's narrative. But even this revelation didn't prompt an immediate case review. Jackson, by then a judge, denied any coercion. His voice, once booming in the courtroom, now sounded cold and self-assured, deflecting accusations like a shield. This confession could have been a turning point, but the system protected its own. Willingham's attorneys fought to leverage the new evidence, but their petitions sank in a bureaucratic quagmire. Webb, whose lie had ruined a life, faded into the shadows, his words an echo of a wrong that could not yet find justice. Part 10. A symbol of the fight against injustice. Cameron Willingham's case became more than one man's story. It was a cry exposing the flaws in the justice system. In 2019, the documentary Trial by Fire, directed by Edward Zwick, brought this tragedy to millions, forcing viewers to confront the face of injustice. David Grann's book, The Devil and Mr. Mills, became a bestseller, its pages steeped in pain and anger that revealed the truth about pseudoscience and bias. Organizations like the Innocence Project seized the case, using it as proof that the death penalty can kill the innocent. Activists worldwide pointed to Willingham as a symbol of a system that punishes without evidence. His name became a rallying cry for those fighting to reform justice, especially in Texas, where the death penalty remained a popular political ritual. In 2011, Texas passed a law requiring scientific standards for fire investigations. It was a small victory, but for Willingham, it came too late. His story forced people to rethink not only investigative methods but the morality of a system that allows such errors. It became a litmus test for a society that must decide whether it's ready to admit its failures to prevent new tragedies. Part 11. The Shadows of Corsicana. Today, Corsicana is a quiet town where the past hides behind new building facades and asphalt roads. The wind sweeps through the streets, stirring dust that settles on old fences, as if trying to erase memories of that fateful night in 1991. Locals avoid talking about Cameron Willingham. To some, he remains forever a killer whose sins brought tragedy. To others, he's a victim whose life was a bargaining chip in a game where truth holds no value. On Avalon Street, where the Willingham house once stood, there's now an empty lot overgrown with weeds. The old wooden homes have been torn down, but memory, like a ghost, haunts these places. Neighbors who once testified against Cameron now avert their eyes when his name is mentioned. It was a long time ago, they say, but their voices tremble as if afraid to stir the ashes of the past. Stacy Willingham, crushed by grief and loss, left Corsicana long ago. She settled far from the town where every street reminded her of her lost children and the husband she couldn't save. In rare interviews, her words ring like an echo of pain. I don't know what happened that night, but I know I lost everything. Her voice, faint and trembling, carries the weight of the unspoken, of a story that never found just closure. Part 12. The Last Ember. Cameron Todd Willingham's story is not just a tale of one man whose fate was crushed by the system. It's a tragedy about justice that burns truth for the sake of a quick verdict, about a society too quick to believe in guilt, and about the price paid by the innocent. His name, etched in letters and newspaper headlines, has become a symbol of a fight for justice that knows no compromise. Today, attorneys and activists continue to demand Willingham's posthumous exoneration. In 2023, they filed another petition, hoping Texas will finally admit its mistake. But officially, he remains guilty. The system's stubbornness, like cold ash left after a fire, reminds us that truth often demands more courage than lies. Will this story teach us to listen? Will it force us to question the infallibility of courts when a life is at stake? Can we see in others' faces not just what we want to see, but the truth hidden beneath? Until these questions find answers, the shadows of Corsicana, like ghosts, will haunt us all, reminding us that the fire of injustice can flare up again. In the darkness, truth always lingers, but sometimes it remains just a shadow, barely noticed. The case of Cameron Todd Willingham is not merely a story of a fire that destroyed a home. It's a story of a system that burns the innocent, of prejudices that outweigh evidence, and of a fight that endures even after the final breath. You've been listening to Shadow of Crime, a place where we uncover the dark corners of human nature and justice teetering on the edge. If this story made you pause, if you felt the chill of injustice, stay with us. Subscribe to the channel to catch new episodes where we'll keep searching for truth in the ashes of forgotten cases. Drop a like if you want us to dive deeper into stories like this. Your comment is a voice that helps us tell more. Share what struck you, which cases you'd like to hear next. And don't forget to hit the bell. In the world of crime and mystery, every sound matters. Share this video with those ready to peer into the darkness. Shadow of Crime isn't just stories. It's a reminder that truth is always worth fighting for. Until next time, in the Shadow of Crime.